It's been almost 7 years now since I was visiting Mono Lake with a friend in California. My friend and I were chased by something that we can only describe looked like some sort of horrible monster with a large head of a dog that walked upright just like a person, with large teeth that stuck out of its mouth, with large claws and no visible tail. This happened earlier in the morning, and nobody else was there at the time, and as we approached the lake, we were chased by what we can only describe as this creature. It broke and burst out of the trees like nobody's business, and began to charge at us, angrily, as if we had disturbed it or even chased off its meal. We were terrified, and ran and retreated back to our car, where we drove out of there so quickly. Whatever this thing was continued to pursue our car, and kept chasing us until we were far out of sight of the area. One thing that really stuck out to me was just how thin and skinny this thing looked. Sure, it was very tall, but it had a very thin tapered waist, and even the chest wasn't very large. But the arms, they hung down very low on its body. They were disproportionately long, and its legs resembled that of a dog, so when it walked upright, it looked awkward, and its back was even hunched, but it looked like it was able to keep its balance quite well, and it didn't have any problems running on 2 legs. I never saw it once switch onto 4 legs. It only stayed on 2, and continued to pursue us for a little while. Once it disappeared, that was the last we saw of it. In the time since then, I have read reports online about people seeing a similar being that exists around that area in California. They describe it as half man, half dog, but it didn't really resemble that of a human or a man, if you ask me. Even though it walked upright like a person and was disproportionate in its body size and style, it didn't really resemble a man. It was more just like a large, upright canine that was really, really skinny. I had a very frightening experience that took place back in 1997 in Plumas County. I can't remember the exact location, but I was driving on a highway somewhere in the woods. I think it was near Greenville, to be exact. I also don't remember the time of year, but I know that it was not fall or winter, so it was probably sometime in the spring or summer. Anyway, I guess those details are relevant. At the time, I was driving my beater, which was an old Ford pickup. I was coming around a bend in the road at about 45 miles an hour when this large wolf animal jumped out onto the road and literally attacked my vehicle. With its hands, or what I would describe as hands, held onto my door handle and tried to yank the door open in an effort to pull me out of the car. It looked up at me with the most human-like eyes I can possibly imagine. The expression on its face was devilish, and like it had evil intentions, like it wanted to rip me out and eat me right then and there. Of course, when this thing jumped out and grabbed hold of my vehicle, it was almost like a trap, like it was waiting right around the bend for me to show up, and as soon as I drove in the right place at the right time, this thing made its move, jumped out, and even though I'm going 40-45 miles an hour, was able to grab hold of my door and try to yank it open with incredible strength. I felt my car give a little bit. I understand this might be hard to grasp, or understand that this all happened in one solid fluid motion, but as soon as it grabbed hold of my hand, I looked over at this thing, and it made eye contact with me, all while I'm going 45 miles an hour around this bend. I look back to the road, and I floor it out of a sudden adrenaline rush, and this thing lets go and starts chasing my truck. Then, within seconds, leaps up into the air, probably 12 feet, and jumps into the bed of my truck, then proceeds to smash its paw through my back window. And keep in mind, this beater isn't anything special. It's a rinky-dink 2-seat truck, and has a little back window like every truck does. Whatever this werewolf creature was, smashed its paw, or fist, whatever, into the back window, trying to grab hold of me, but for some reason couldn't. Probably because I was swerving all over the road, and it's only by the grace of God that there wasn't any oncoming traffic, or anybody behind or in front of me, because there for sure would have been an accident. No questions asked about that. Within seconds, I made a sharp turn to my right and nearly threw this thing out of the bed of my pickup truck. I almost had a head-on collision with a large oak tree until I finally rotated the wheel enough that I could actually stabilize and straighten out my truck and floor it out of there. I think I knocked this thing onto the pavement, and it seemed stunned, but when I kept checking back in my rearview mirror, it was gone. I never saw this thing disappear, nor did I ever see this thing jump off into the woods, so I don't know what happened to it or where it went off to. For all I knew, it was paralleling me in the woods, and I had no idea, so I floored it even faster and got out of there. This was easily one of my most traumatic experiences that I've ever gone through, and you wouldn't imagine explaining how I got my back window punched in to my girlfriend at the time. I couldn't tell her some Wolfman thing did it, or that it jumped in the bed of my truck and nearly tried to kill me, so I had to make up a story that I was being dumb and threw a rock at my back window. Trust me, I got the cold shoulder for months afterwards, and was even forced to sleep out on the couch. But what was I supposed to do? Nobody would have believed my story. Sometimes when I think back on it, and I think the world we live in, I question if I'm not going crazy, that it was some sort of nightmare, that I just envisioned the whole thing, that maybe, just maybe, I fell asleep at the wheel. But I know for sure what happened. It's just too vivid of a memory. I'll never forget the eyes and the way it looked at me. It looked animalistic, but there was something behind the eyes. Something that told me that it had intent, very evil intent, that wanted to hurt me, do damage to me, get to me, like it was waiting for me. I'll never be able to accurately come up with an explanation for that. I don't even think anything can really explain that. My close friend just very recently introduced me to your channel, but more importantly, your Dogman playlist that has nearly 200 videos worth of encounters. Now, I've only begun to scratch the surface and dig through a few, but you seem like you know a lot about these creatures, which begs me to ask the burning question. Have you ever heard of or know anything about supposed buffalo wolves? Well, the reason I ask you, a few years back, a close buddy of mine believed he shot one of these things in eastern Idaho, or maybe it was closer to Montana. Either way, he was elk hunting and apparently came upon a juvenile whatever these things are. It stood up on two legs and tried to attack him, but he brought his magnum with him and blew part of its shoulder out, and I believe it bled to death by what he told me. He said this sucker's ugly as can be, and has ever only heard of buffalo wolves before, and about how large they can actually get up to. But he's pretty sure this was one of them, and that it was a juvenile, because he said it was much smaller than what he's heard. He said it was maybe around 5'4", 5'5" if he had to guess, and even though it had a really large head, it was still shorter than him. My friend who shot him is about 5'10", 5'11". He had just gotten a good kill, and apparently, this thing showed up out of nowhere and tried to not only attack him, but he believes it was planning to steal his kill. Well, he thought quick and killed whatever this thing was. His plan was to actually come back for the body of this thing, and probably get meat off it from what I guess, or maybe he wanted it taxidermied. I'm not exactly sure, but he got his kill and hauled it back, and then, when he came back for his buffalo wolf kill the next day, it was gone, like it had just gotten up and left. There were even no signs of the blood that occurred the day before. And then he told me about when he came back to this area the following day to retrieve the kill of this buffalo wolf, that the entire area just felt different, like he was being watched from afar or all around him, and that he was expecting something bad to happen at any given moment. Well, safe to say he didn't stick around very long and got out of there. He describes the whole thing as very strange that a kill that large would just be removed without question, and with no traces of blood or any trailing in the dirt that would indicate some sort of predator dragging the body off or even being feasted upon. It was just gone, like it never happened, like it vanished out of thin air. There's nothing that could explain that. since it hadn't even been a full 24 hours since he killed whatever this thing was, that he believed to be a juvenile buffalo wolf. This is a friend of mine who's been hunting for a very long time, and does his same routine just about every year, and always goes around eastern Idaho into Montana. Nothing he did was out of the ordinary, or out of change for him, but whatever this thing was, he's only ever heard of them before, and never actually seen one until this time. He even told me that whatever this thing was took him by surprise, which is why he was shocked and scared, and had he not blown this thing's shoulder open, it would have taken his life, and probably ripped his throat out. It appeared to be very aggressive and hostile, he said. He wonders if he approached on its territory, or if it was solely intent on killing him, eating him, and taking the elk kill he had just gotten. And the area in which he was hunting is more of a desolate private area. He doesn't know if it's government-owned or privately owned, but there's not that many people that know about it. It's one of those places that's kind of off a dirt road, which is off another dirt road, which is off a large gravel road, which is off a back road. You know how those things go. Especially if you're a hunter and have gone down those kind of routes before and searched for game trails and places to hunt. I believe him, and I don't feel like he has any reason to make this up. He's not seeking notoriety or fame by any means. In fact, he even wanted me to keep his name anonymous, and was very adamant about getting the idea that these things are really out there, and that they do exist. And people who do hunt, especially in the thick woods and mountains, need to be very careful and always bring extra firearms, and that these things can be taken down if you shoot them properly. Don't be afraid, just be armed.